Brian, you have been head of player pathway and loans position at the club since probably about February 2019.
Yeah, it was after speaking to Tony, the sporting director, when he came in. They were looking to make a few changes quite quickly with one or two things, and we had a good chat about young players and the development. The time I've spent at the club, you've seen a lot of highs and lows. A lot of young players coming through and progressing. Down that pathway of coming through the academy, playing in the development reserves first team, and then going on to bigger and better things. So we had a good chat about that. We felt maybe in the last few years that for whatever reason that there seemed to be a little void there between the ages of 16, 17 to 21, 22, 23. So Tony was suggesting that he felt there was just almost a new role. So that connection between the academy with obviously Andy coming in, Andy Gold coming in as a new academy director, with Tony himself as well, and also with Robbie, the first team head coach as well. That they needed somebody to connect, or mentor those players that are in that in that bracket where sometimes they can get lost a little bit. They can end up just sort of plateauing and then they're just falling away. So and that's where we talked about this role, about looking at what is the right thing for some of the players. Is it to go out on loan? Is it to stay within the building? And also, if they are going out on loan, what type of club they go to? Is it the right club for them? Is it the timing of it? Are they at the right age of mature enough to go and do that as well? So there's quite a lot of strings to the bow, as you would say.
Yeah.
But it certainly has been, still finding my feet a little bit with it as well. With the new, obviously, under-18s coming in, majority of the young boys. And it's not only looking at players, but you're also trying to help with some of these young coaches that we have as well. So you're doing a little bit of mentoring with them as well. Not that I interfere or anything like that, but you're always there as a good sounding board for them as well, with regards to just the players and whether it be specifics or whether it be tactical, whether it be technical as well.
The actual job role, certainly when I heard that you were going to be taking on that role, I was kind of scurrying about the internet to find out more about what it entails myself. I believe you were probably one of the first in this position within Scotland.
Yeah, I think that historically clubs like ourselves and other clubs have always put players out on loan, but we felt that a lot of clubs, and we were guilty of it as well at some point, we would just throw somebody out on loan and just throw him out on loan like he's away on loan and let him go and find for himself, see how he gets on. We thought, let's probably more structure into this, and let's look at where they're going, what type of club is it, where is that club, or are they, is it the right environment for this player to go into that club, and also just go and watch the players and get a lot more feedback on it, a lot more reporting on it. So it's not only myself that's doing that, there's other members of staff that are regularly going to watch these players as well out on loan. There's a lot of people raised their eyebrows when we decided to put young Louis Aperti Broughty at the end of January, beginning of February, and possibly could we have waited and maybe gotten something higher, but there is no doubt in my mind that what he'd done there, by going in, playing on a regular basis, scoring loads of goals, it boosted his confidence, it boosted his self-esteem. He came back in the summertime absolutely flying. And any time we seen him playing, he was scoring goals or he was scoring assists. I think he got 22 goals or something in a very short space of time. And it was a win-win situation for both the club and for the player. He's came back in pre-season. Really looked very, very good. First couple of pre-season games, he was looking sharp, he was looking strong. We maybe like for him to score a few more goals, but ironically enough, he scored 2 and 2 recently. And then I think the manager didn't have really an option but not to put him in and to give him a wee taste of it. And I think at the start of the season, once he had a wee run of games, the people can see that he's done well and he's merited being in. And hopefully he can continue that form as well. And I've no doubt that little spell he had there has certainly enhanced and developed his his football career. There's no question about that.
Would it have helped the fact that you were pretty much overseeing the academy before you took on that role? Would it have helped that you will have had a good depth of knowledge on a lot of these young players who are now perhaps stepped up into that band?
Yeah, that's another reason as well. I thought that Tony and the manager as well thought that it would be a good idea because you've known a lot of these players since they've been 8-9 year old. Now they're at that point where they're coming in full time. You know them, you know what their character's like, you know what their personalities are like. Where there's been quite a number of new staff came to the club and they weren't quite sure about them, quite how to deal with them. So there's all those little dynamics that you need to deal with as well when you're dealing with young players, and the fact that you've seen them coming from primary school all the way through. Now they're young working men in an environment which is that environment has changed a lot as well, and with the new owners, there's no question about that. You go over to the HPC at St Andrews, there's a lot more what you would say sort of maybe saying positivity, but there's the environment is an environment that as a player and a member of staff that you want to be involved in. You want to go and work there. You want to get to that place and see what you're doing with the young players and also some of the senior players as well. I still try and catch up with some of the young players that are in the first team as well. Just a wee chat, see how they're doing, what have you. I for Jamie Robson. Just to see how he's feeling, see how he's getting on, and I'm glad that he's certainly turning in a few more consistent performances. Although I think he admitted today that he could have done a wee bit better on Tuesday night against Aidan Nisbet.
That's always good to hear that they're continually wanting to improve. You mentioned the HPC there over at the University of St Andrews. Given that everyone's over there now together, I think evidently that will be helping bring that cohesion and togetherness there. But it must also, I would imagine, make your job easier, that you could see these players that are going through the
For example, you're going to watch you're regularly watching under 18s training with the development players, and then in fairness to Robbie, he's had a lot of young players up training in the first team on a regular basis, which is absolutely brilliant for their development, for their experience as well. So there's some days you maybe go and watch them with the first team and see how they're doing and talk to them about how they felt they get on and what they can do to improve when they go into that environment. And we're always stressing, certainly I'm always stressing them that when they get that opportunity, they need to make sure they're ready to go up and train with the first team, and don't allow that to affect them just going to do the same things that you're doing with the 18s and development. And I think the boys can see that pathway now. They see that pathway is there. They can see that they're getting those opportunities. And as you've seen over the course of the season, or even over the course of the last 8-9 months, there's been a lot of young players involved in matchday squads and a lot of young boys. Young Christopher Mockery making his debut at Mortland the last game of the season. 16 years of age, still at school. Which is a great testament to the manager to throw him in there as well, and also from Tony, that strategy of getting young players and getting them close to the first team environment, and I suppose that's part of my remit as well, is to try and get these guys in front of the manager to see what he thinks of them, and then take it from there. If they're not quite ready, then they'll come back down, and then if he feels that they are ready, then he'll get them back involved in that environment, which is great for them. Absolutely brilliant.
When I think you touched on the fact there that young players get involved in the first team. If I could take you back a few years now to when you were a player, Dundee United was were famous for bringing through players through the youth academy. We're starting to see that pathway. I wouldn't say it ever went away, but certainly the production line slowed down. We're starting to see that pathway again. As somebody who experienced playing against Dundee United teams that were like that, and somebody who obviously worked in that environment for a while through the academy side, it must be really satisfying for yourself to see.
Yeah, I felt when I first came to the club that the club was in a very, very good place at that point. With regards to first team and the academy as well, we'd made a lot of changes at that point, and there was quite a lot of success, and then for a period of time that success seemed to I say the production line will stop, but I think, for me, I think players need opportunity, and I think young players need to play. An example, that's Louis Appel. For me, he's been given, the manager's had a lot of faith in him this year, and he's putting him in, and he's repaid him that faith, the performance he's given. I think the difficult thing that the last few years has been is the club. The main goal has been getting out of the Championship back into the Premier League. So I can understand some managers looking at a young player, looking at a senior player, and going with the senior player. But at the same time, I've seen a lot of senior players in that period of time that I don't think were that far ahead of some of the young players. So I will always try and sort of advocate for those young players, but I totally understand there's an element of trust there in young players because they're not quite, don't understand maybe the full, tactical elements of the game yet. They're still learning that, particularly on the other side of the game. It's not necessarily with the ball, it's things off the ball and taking risks in certain areas of the park as well. We still have a lot of young players like that we don't want to discourage them from doing that, but we need to make them aware of the consequences if they do it in the wrong area of the park. And you could go and say that, but I still think we've players that probably should have played more games for us before they left.
I think that's an important part of the job that you've got now, is that and you spoke about earlier about the void and these guys that maybe fell into that before. If we look at, we've got a number of players out on loan at the moment, different clubs, different levels. I'm interested to, you spoke there about Louis going to Broughty and maybe we could have held off. I'm interested to see, a wee bit of the insight as to how you decide who's going where.
Yeah, there is. A lot of people come on the phone and wanting players, but we've got to ask them. A lot of clubs come on the phone and ask them for players, but they've never actually seen them playing. And a lot of clubs will stockpile players that they need for their bench and not necessarily play them. So we have to be very selective in what we're doing with that. We want the players to go and. Now, we can't demand it, guarantee that they can play, but they've got to be given the opportunity to go and play. And a good example, again, is this season is Declan Glass. Now, we're discussing at the start of the season, we need to get him, as high as possible alone. But my argument was, no, he needs to go and play week in, week out, full 90 minutes and have impact. And he's certainly done that. And watching him now, comparably 6 months ago, I think he's maturing as a player. He's having that impact. I think he's got 6 goals from the middle of the park for Cove Rangers, who are, playing at the top of the league. And there's also that element as well, that element of playing with that pressure, having to win games to win a league. So he's getting that little bit of experience of that, what is like, rather than just going and turn up for somebody that's sitting bottom of the league or sitting in the middle of the table, and the consequences of the results are irrelevant. Whereas he knows that he goes that if he does well, then. And we also thought that Cove Rangers would have quite a little bit of following this year, just to see them come to the higher league, and so far they've done well. With the last 2 weeks have had poor results, and again, that loan has worked well for Declan. Last year he went out to Airdrie last January, and probably it was relatively successful. He had a reasonable game time, but I think he learnt from that. I think he learnt, by going into that environment and maybe not doing the things that maybe he should have done. He learnt from that. So when he's went to Cove, he's in a better place. So hopefully when he comes back into the building, he's ready to go and make his mark here in the first team at Dundee United.
Various characters, and I think society's changed nowadays, and we're speaking here about creating players for Dundee United, but I guess part of your job is also creating characters and creating personalities for life.
Yeah, one of the things that certainly when I was involved in the academy and now as well is that if the player will leave Dundee United at some point, and there's no question about that, whether he goes on to bigger and better things or he goes away and falls away, going playing at a lower level or going playing somewhere else. Now I think we've got a duty of care to those players as well when they're exiting from the club, to try and find them a club that is suitable for them, or try and help them. And a good example of that at the moment is Jordan Moore, who was a young player coming through. Unfortunately, was diagnosed with with the cancer, what he went through. But he's came back into the club now as in a full-time role, and hopefully he's trying to find those next stars that can go on and be first team players and beyond that as well. And again, it's something. And I've had a good relationship with Jordan, young player. For when I came in, seeing him all the way through, and the tragedy was happened to him. There's no doubt that he could finish. He was a very, very, very good finisher, and I'm sure he won't be slow in telling you that. But now he's got a really important role at the club, and we need to help him with that as well. So it's part of my job to sort of, so mentor him, but certainly kind of guide him and help him with that as well, to see how he gets on.
So how closely, without revealing the Dundee United blueprint here, but how closely do you work? How much of your job's meetings with, whether it's Adam Ashgar, whether it's with Robbie Nielsen, Tony Asghar? Yeah,
you're constant dialogue most days. Mm-hmm. There's constant dialogue most days, communication about players, and every morning, you're having a conversation about who's going to train with the first team, who's not going to train with the first team, and why, and we take him because we need that there, and whatever it may be, whatever the manager needs, and we need to help him as much as we possibly can, to make sure that his training's at the right standard, that he's getting what he's getting out of the players on a daily basis, so that results in the performance at the weekend. And if that means young players going in there, and some days it'll be not always the same players, but they're always getting that little bit of experience. So there's always that dialogue. If for whatever reason Robbie can't make a game, there's this feedback about how players have done, and a good example of that was a few weeks ago when a young lad, Lewis Nielsen, had a terrific game, and the manager says, "Look, get him in the squad for tomorrow." So those little things, are vital for that, to go back and, and he didn't, he came and be involved in the first team squad, and I don't think he was stripped, but again, 16-year-old being involved in the first team, being around about it, that learning experience, that culture of that, and that togetherness of everybody as well. We need to make sure that we're all striving for the same goal. We're all looking for success at the club, but we're all going in the same direction. There's not people kind of looking after this little bit and looking after that little bit, looking and working in their own little silos. We're all trying to make sure that A, we're successful at the club, B, the big thing this season, as I said before, is certainly getting promotion, because I think it changed the whole landscape of and the club, the infrastructure, the innovation that Tony and the new owners have brought to the club, the resources, and the level of support, is night and day to what it was before.
It's interesting, Brian, because that level of support is clearly there. You speak about the resources that are now available, but something you touched on earlier, if there's not that pathway for players, and you talk about Lewis Nielsen there, that opportunity to go out, perform well, and know that you're going to be rewarded. I think it's the carrot for the players to do well. And I think they see that, and as I said to you before, that is quite clear. On a daily basis, there'll be at least 2, 3, 4 16-year-olds training the first team. Now, you could argue if they're ready to do that, but I think for their development, I think for their experience, and for them to learn quicker, they'll get a hard time, and rightly so, because that's the demand that's put on them from the first team. Because the first team want to train properly, and they want to, because they're fighting for a league here. So if they see a young boy, and there was an example of that this morning at RPC, poor wee Archie got it tight from a senior player, and I said to him, that's the demand on you, that's what will happen. You need to be ready for that. You need to grow up quite quickly, because it is an environment that is brutal at times, and it's ruthless, so they need to be ready for that. If they make a mistake or they make an error that leads to them losing a goal, that's the way it should be in training, because that then manifests itself when you go into a game, and when you go into that the run that the first team we run recently, that keeping 5 clean sheets in a row, unbelievable stat, and that comes from
the training environment. It comes from that culture of and the standards that is demanded on a daily basis from the manager.
At times, fans will primarily care about results at the first team level, but there's been very few occasions this season, I think, when we haven't had a younger player at least on the bench. Some of them coming on, and that again, just that perspective again for from supporters that know that their club traditionally had that line of production line, seeing players coming through and being on the bench and again it's all part of a feel good factor and togetherness that's helping things.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can see that over the last 3 or 4 years with the sort of pressure of coming out of the league, I think it has been difficult for managers to go and put in. But I think young players, don't have that or feel that pressure at times. They just want to go and play. They just want to play football, and they just want to go enjoy that. But they're not, as I said to you before as well, they're not maybe quite ready tactically at times or physically ready at this moment in time. But you're right what you said. I mean, we've had so many young boys who have been running about on a weekly basis. For instance, the 3 young lads that extended their contracts recently. Nathan Cooney's been on the bench a couple of times. Archie McKinsey's been on the bench, which is great for their experience as well, to be around about that and be close to that as well. Now, it might not happen this season. It might be a wee bit while, but just for them to get that taste of that, they want more of it. They're hungry. They want more of it, and then I suppose that's where my job is to come in and say, look, you've got a wee taste of it. Just keep doing what you're doing, and that's why they've been rewarded by getting extensions to their contract.
How will you judge success for yourself and the role you're in?
I think success for me is seeing a young player, making his debut with Dundee United and then become the regular, playing 50 to 100 games, and then the possibility of moving on from that. And then I think it's a win-win situation for the club. I think the club see a young player coming through, playing that amount of games, and then hopefully somebody comes in and spends £3 million and the club is rewarded with that. There's a win situation for there, and also that young player is life changing. It's life changing if you think about some of the players in the past, and I don't sometimes think the young players realise what's at stake at times, and the sacrifices that they need to make to get there as well. But yeah, I think I take great delight when I see young players, and even I'm a wee bit kind of sad as well. Saturday night I'll scroll through all the lineups probably right throughout Scotland that day, and then see which players that have crossed your path that are playing, and that gives me great delight as well. We have sometimes people say, so you've let somebody go and he's doing well. I say, well, good. I take a bit of pride in that the development they may have had here has helped them go on and achieve somewhere else. So I don't be bitter about those things. Whatever reason at that time, that either player or we've made a decision. I think sometimes it's better to make that decision and be brave, and you'll get them wrong sometimes. There's no question about that. But no, I think that for me is to see obviously the first team winning, but winning with a few young players in the team or in the matchday squad, which is would be a win-win situation.